introducing our guest speaker. I think I have come across many curriculums in my life and many biographies, but I think by far this is the best I have ever encountered so far, and I'm going to read it to you. I'm like, it's just a line and a half. Chris Precht, I'm pronouncing it right, more or less. Okay, good. Is the co-founder of Studio Precht. His husband to Faye, father of Theo and Emma, and an architect in the mountains of Austria. Full stop. That's it. No, I have a collection of 25 degrees, 34 awards, thousands of projects, X amount of square meters built. Really is not necessary. And I think this tells a lot about Chris' humbleness. I think he lets his work speak. He doesn't need to, stuff it in the CV, stuff it in the bio, because I think his exceptional work speaks by itself. The second thing I think is very relevant to mention for today is that I personally, and as also director of IAAC, feel extremely honored that Chris has agreed to give his first lecture after 4 years of a kind of silence in the kind of public medium, somehow not, deciding not to give lectures, and maybe he will tell us some of that later today. But, I'm particularly honored that he has chosen us to break that silence for a while. We don't know if it's the last one in another 4 years, maybe, who knows, but, take this opportunity, absorb everything, because I think it's going to be fantastic. The other thing is, and with this I will close, Chris has prepared a lecture that has a title, Architects Anonymous. And I will read briefly the brief and say a couple of words before handing it over to him. He states, architecture events often presents idealistic standards of perfection, concealing the challenges architects face beneath the surface. Chris Precht, with 6 years of experience at the Studio Precht, has learned that the initial enthusiasm of architecture often gives way to a heavy responsibility. Creatives project their work in a competitive industry, showing confidence and success while keeping as private their failures and conflicts. In this lecture, Chris aims to share the shift in perspective that parenthood has revealed to him, underlying the value of sharing struggles and vulnerability alongside success as a way to grow. So I think today is a fantastic opportunity to learn from somebody I deeply admire, that I think is an absolutely fantastic architect, that he confessed a few hours ago that he was very close to become a IAAC student back in 2011, 2012. It would have been great to have him in the alumni, but this is still not over. I'm sure we can somehow bring him back. So I'm happy about that. But also, he will combine that with the real struggle. We know this is not an easy journey. We all work really, really hard. There are many struggles along the way. And I think it's very important to not pretend that, when we show our work to a larger community, everything is perfect, because in reality, we know that's the result of very hard work and overcoming thousands of challenges. So without further ado, I first of all welcome you, but please join me collectively in welcoming Chris Precht to IAAC tonight. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everybody. Whoa. I didn't know if I should stand or if I should sit, but so many of you there in the back are standing, so maybe I stand with you in solidarity. But the topic I chose today to talk about, maybe at a certain point I feel very vulnerable and I need to hide a little bit on this chair behind the desk and so, but for the moment, maybe I put it a bit away. Maybe one more word to this CV, because you mentioned it. I think Erica then wrote back to me if I can make it a bit longer, my CV. And I was thinking to myself that the only way I make it longer is if I get a third child, because then I could add a name, but otherwise, we keep it that way. let me I have a couple of notes because as Daniel mentioned, I didn't necessarily give a real lecture for quite some time. And this one had a couple of different reasons. So first of all, COVID hit, and I think all of our priorities and our hierarchies of what is important in our life shifted a little bit. My wife and myself, we were as well very productive during COVID, and we came with 2 kids more out of it than we went in. And making plans with your kids, it's always a little bit a little thing. But the main reason I stopped giving lectures was a different one. I did give lectures a lot, not a lot, but some of them when we were starting. So when we were a bit younger and we were starting our studio, and they were all always fun. I was able to talk about our projects, our vision, about our concepts and ideals. But lingering beyond that was always the feeling that, yes, I talk about this beautiful thing, but there is also this feeling that I'm not talking about other things, like this struggling when you don't have an idea for a project, or this worrying when a client doesn't pay, or this setting up of an office and leading a team and all the struggle that comes with that, or the feeling when you are having an idea that works out so well in your mind and is so strong in your mind, but is so wrong on paper, and this self-doubt that comes with that, and the feeling that you're not good enough and maybe you're not made for that. And I was talking about the positive, but not necessarily about all these negative feelings I have. And while it felt a bit flat just talking about this one side, like talking about the negative side would have felt like professional suicide. And meanwhile, there were all these architectural events, and they were filled with award-winning architects and very inspiring projects and beautiful stories and all of that. And I was somehow at these events, and I was thinking, is it just me who feels this way, and has everyone else figured it out? And maybe I'm just not made for that. And I was somehow in a looking, I don't know, for meaning, that sounds, but somehow, trying to find out a bit more about myself. Sounds as well bad, but you know what I mean. Questioning a little bit what we were doing. So I started to talk to a lot of people on Instagram. We had these Let's Talk ARC sessions where we posted some questions and talked actually exactly about these kind of topics. I also talked to many students and professors and architects, seasoned architects, Pritzker Prize winner, and so forth. And you know what? They all complained, and they all struggled about similar things than I did, but privately and not in public. And we are a very complex profession. Like, we are somehow in ourselves, we see ourselves as artists, but I think we are not, because art, for art, I think it needs to come with vulnerability, and it needs to come with struggle. I think struggle and vulnerability, without that, art is shallow. But if you are an architect and you second guess yourself all the time and are in self-doubt, with your decisions, and communicate this to the client, this could have some bad consequences. It can feel that the client, then they could take advantage of it. And at the end, we are very intertwined with the ruthless capital market. Without that, none of our projects will be built. And people could take advantage of this vulnerability. by, you know, lessening your fees, or getting more of their side into a compromise that actually you are willing to take. So showing this openly, that, you know, you're self-doubting yourself and you don't know if things or this idea or this concept will ever work out, could be not to benefit in our profession. Yeah, so this was always this part of this self-finding way. And then, you know, as an architect, you somehow choose to maybe show more the positive side and the success stories, and show the result, but not necessarily this messy process. And I totally get that as well. You know, like I know that, you know, it's not every day that I can present myself, my thoughts, our work at the university like IAAC, and, you know, I'm extremely grateful to be here. So I also don't want to waste this opportunity, you know, to show off a little bit of our work, because at the end, I'm extremely proud of what we are doing. I love our projects and I'm super passionate about them. And let's be honest, you know, of course, architects, they work on their projects to have a positive contribution to society, to the client, to families. But I think the nicest part, like deeply in ourselves, is if we are able to brag with our work to other architects. I think this is somewhat of an essence for us as well. So, you know, to not being necessarily able to do that, it's maybe a bit of a wasted opportunity. And you know, so I get it when successful architects that I talk to are more showing than the result, than actually the messiness behind it. But I also know that, you know, this is not the entire story about architecture. And at the moment, a lot of young creatives and young talents, they are leaving our industry. And there must be a reason for that, right? And I think as a profession, we also need to ask ourselves the hard questions. Because if I remember when I was a student, and you might feel exactly the same, but this level of enthusiasm and the ideals that we have is immense. And actually, when you are coming out from university and you go into profession, this level of enthusiasm should actually be elevated, because now you're going from theory to practice, and you could actually, what you always dreamed of, you can now design and build in the real world. So actually, this should be even more excitement. And but somehow our profession has a tendency to suppress that, you know, through unpaid internships with, or, you know, not enough responsibilities, or, you know, no work-life balance, and all this baggage that somehow comes with architecture. And as a young generation, and I include myself there already, although I feel like I'm already 60. But as a young generation, I think we get passionate about things if they have two things: if they are authentic and if they have meaning. And when we then leave university and we start our own practice and we get into the profession, and things or architecture is not necessarily like it is advertised, it misses this kind of authenticity. And without being authentic, there is also not a meaning in the world, in the work. And you know, like while I'm saying this, my brain is already, you know, shouting, "Ah, Chris, you damn hypocrite! You know, you sound now like, you know, you have all figured out, and you have these ideals and morals built within our office, and this is not at all the case. I think my ideals and my morals are also like shifting like a pendulum, and I'm lying a lot to myself within the project, within the process, to somehow make things work. And in theory, you know, I think we have ideals. We want to work on buildings with a low ecological footprint, maybe work with natural materials, we want to think circular. We want to work with clients that give us enough freedom, but are as well involved in the process. And they should pay that that we also can survive in a way. So I think there are these ideals, but then when projects are coming, I see already, my rational side of the brain trying to convince myself, yes, but maybe we can change the client, right? Maybe through our work, he's not believing so much in capitalism anymore, and let's this aside, and maybe he comes over to the ecological side. Or why not, take this master plan, and if we want to have an impact, why not on a bigger scale? Or why should we always say no to NEOM, for example, when they ask so many times, when all the other architects seem to work there now, and you're somehow trying to shift your ideals towards somehow a compromise within yourself, and I think this was the longest I spoke on stage without showing a first slide. But what comes out then is somehow a city of the compromise, and this the city of rational, of somehow of bent ideals. And who is inspired by that? And if you are not inspired by from the place you're living, like how do you get the sense of belonging? And if you don't have a sense of belonging, how then you don't care about the place, and you don't maintain it and help to build a community and so forth, right? So I think there are, and when if buildings are a communication tool between generations, what does this say about us, and what do we want to say with that? So I think we need now probably more than ever this strong excitement and enthusiasm and ideals in our work. But then this question is, how could we actually defend that when we lack of experience, or if we lack of or if creativity makes all of these decisions? And then the rational side of the brain is again saying, yeah, we need to be strong on our ideals, and we need to defend them, and we have strong morals, and these ones we get through. But the creative side that does all these projects and visions then says, well, but have you met me? Like I'm living in this sea of uncertainty and self-doubt, and how can I defend anything if I don't even know if it works out? And this is somehow true as well. Some of our now, I would say, best projects, they started with the question, like, is this completely bonkers? Like, can we really do that? And, even while a project was built, there was still this voice in my head and said, nah, this is stupid. Like, no, this is not a building. And other architects will point the finger on you, and they will laugh at you, and this is probably your last thing you will ever design. But then, it turned out to be quite great, and because it was surprising and it was something new. But before that, how can you defend that? How can you have a really strong mind to actually say, okay, this is the right direction that we are going? Because at the end, like intelligence, I think, is the thing you are using to get to a certain result. But creativity is what you're using when you don't know what the result is, and when you don't know what the path is towards this result. And how can you defend that if you don't know the path, and if you don't know the result? And this, I don't want to come over as awfully negative. I think, like, you have maybe there are two ways of actually reading the lecture today, and one is more, okay, there's struggle, and why even even bother them, right? But the second one is, well, there might be struggles, but I think, with enough enthusiasm and enough ideals, we can collectively overcome it, right? And maybe this is then part of what it means to be creative as well. And maybe as a disclaimer that, that this one doesn't come off over too negative. I love architecture. Like since architecture is in my life, I think my life completely changed. I'm super passionate about this. Just this way of how an idea gets into your brain. It comes from nowhere, and miraculously it lands in your hand and not in the other architect's head, and it is there, and now you are able to bring it to paper. I mean, this is something such a beautiful kind of thing. And as creatives in general, I think we all have a very rich inner world, which is a beautiful thing by itself. And I think we all had this probably before. I can remember, when I was younger and imagining, oh, if this girl would be my girlfriend, or if I would live in this country, how would my life be? Or if I would be the best in ski jumping, how would this change my reality? So we all, dreamed up these different worlds to flee from our own reality. And now, when we want to escape our reality, and sometimes, with 2 kids, and so you really want to escape your own reality, and we dream up these other worlds, it's called Monday. It's really part of our job, and that makes our job so wonderfully rich and beautiful. And especially, I think, as students and as people who are starting to come into our profession, because the mind is not yet corrupted by compromises and so forth. So I think this inner world is still very, very rich. But then you come into architecture, and people then tell you, yeah, okay, you do that, right? But it's just a very tiny little thing of your, like a tiny part of your job. To be, dream up these worlds and having these visions. And this might be true and vary from office to office, of course. But I think that this is also our mistake and our fault collectively as architects, that we let it become a very tiny part of our job, this wonderfully imagination that we like to explore. We let somehow this market of higher, faster, and cheaper make a lot of sacrifices from our side, and we compromised collectively. And maybe we compromised because we didn't talk enough about our struggles that we are going through, and the negative part, because that maybe as well shifted then the borders and the lines where we compromise, maybe, or maybe not. I really don't know. So maybe as a break in between, like today there are as well a lot of people, I think, on Zoom there, and I think as well my team is sitting in the office, and they joined on Zoom, and somebody told me that they are making a drinking game today. So whenever I think I say somebody told me that whenever I say the word maybe, you have to take a shot. And because this is today a lecture about uncertainty and I don't knows and maybes, I'm not sure if they are going to work tomorrow. Maybe, or maybe not. So yeah, I thought I'm gonna structure the talk today in 4 different phases. You already can feel that it is a very personal kind of lecture I give today, and maybe as well I tell a few personal things of how we started. Maybe some of you can find yourself in the struggles or in the moments of bliss that we had, and can take something from that. So the first part is how we started. The first part is the connecting part. Okay. Anyway, like behind this shield, there is a mountain. Yeah. My team says thank you. So this is my dad. And my dad, he was a climber, a super extreme one. He climbed most of the mountains and most of the tours in free solo. That means no security and yeah, just him and the mountain. Yeah, sure. Like when you ask him why he's doing that and why he's risking his life actually to climb a mountain this way, he always said that he feels the most freedom, like whenever he climbs this way, he's reminded back then when he was a kid. And I think, and he said that the most freedom somebody can feel when they are grown up is to feel like a kid again. And I was always wondering, you know, my father, he was a really good climber, and I always wondered, you know, why he didn't monetize that. Like, why was this his hobby and not his job? He could have easily found sponsors and be this his job, but he found somewhere else a job that he actually hates, just that he's able to keep the mountains and the climbing as his hobby. And this was and I never really understood that. But now when I try to ask myself a lot of questions, I now understand that. And yeah. Okay. Because yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. But anyway, there's no slide at the moment, so it's fine. No pressure. But now I somehow understand it. Why, you know, he use it as a hobby and not as a profession, because as a hobby, you know, he still could feel very connected to his inner child. And I think there is something as well in architecture that can relate to that, because we also have this playfulness, this certain naivety, this innocence as an architect, and maybe there is something the same, and maybe it's not that intense, because at the end it is not our hobby. Although I think I also would do it without getting paid, but don't tell this to our clients. But you know, we are a profession, we are getting paid for that. So there's always this level of compromise built within. Maybe I use this to drink it. So this as well, there wouldn't be a slide, so you don't miss anything. So the startup phase in our case was actually a very interesting one. We, like most of you, did some competition while we were studying, and our first project, we got through a very good business strategy. We lied. There was a competition and 3 finalists. We were one of them, and back then you could stream you could share your screen with the people, with the client. The client was sitting in China, we were in Austria. So we shared our screen and we elevated how big we are as an office and stuff like that. And as well, we put some sound, or I YouTubed office sounds, and we put this on the speaker. So behind ourselves, the client heard a lot of fax machines and people chatting, but actually it was just Faye and myself sitting on our table in our pajamas. But we won, and the client then bought us a ticket to China, and this was incredible. We could go for free to China, and yeah, this project was built. It was nothing special, but it was somehow the starting point of our time then as an architect. We founded then a little office. We were called Panda, and there we were for a couple of years then in China. And for me, this was a great pride to be suddenly not just an architect, but to be an international architect with an office in China. It felt really good. But now, I'm in this weird phase of my life where I'm questioning a lot of the decisions we are making. And as well there, in hindsight, this time in China, I always could hide behind a barrier of language. I could hide behind a barrier of culture. And this was probably important because I could learn a lot of things, but at the same time, the projects we were doing, they didn't feel so personal. And because they didn't feel personal, there was always a little bit of a hole. And then our office grew, and we got to a certain amount of people, and our structure grew, but so did somehow this hole. And there it was somehow clear for us we need to change something, and that we did. For that, then as well, this whole definition of success, we re-evaluated. So for ourselves, we didn't need to be like the biggest office. We didn't need to be the most successful office, but we wanted to be happy architects and a happy office. Now I would re-evaluate this one as well. I think it's not just about happiness, but it is more about being fulfilled, and being fulfilled means that you're not happy all the time. But this one was then this change. And then we said, okay, we're going to move back to Austria. And this one was quite of a difficult time in my life. Back then, my father, he had an accident in the mountains and he fell and died. At the same time, we moved then back in a kind of a hustle back to Austria. So it was personally and professionally quite a difficult time. I can go faster. And before, we had this office in China, we had projects, we had clients, we had a little bit of money that at least, we can survive as an office. But now it was just Faye and myself on the kitchen table again. And we didn't have any clients, we didn't have any projects, but at the same time, we had a lot of freedom. And somehow then, architecture felt like a hobby. It felt like a passion again. And there was something so freeing. So we were working on projects that we were really passionate about. For example, we started this little house where you can plant some gardens on top of it, because we love gardening, and we have a large garden as well right at our house. And then bring this concept into the city. I don't talk too much about projects, but just about this personal approach. And this one maybe as well then alters a bit the city centers that we are having, and bringing more of this lifestyle that we are living in the mountains as well, maybe back into our cities. This to really experience with all of your senses, maybe a good and a healthy neighborhood, healthy air, natural materials, and all of that. So their architecture felt really, really personal, because we were somehow working on how we were actually living. And then we started this little thing. So we didn't have any client then still. So all of the projects we did were self-initiated projects. And we started this little tree house because then our first son was born. And we saw maybe architecture through a more naive and a playful goggles. And this one, maybe one little backstory, we called this treehouse Bird, and we gave him a name. And this was probably the best decision I did in architecture in my professional life, because we made this treehouse a kind of a person, and we personalized him. All of the applications we did at bureaucracy and so, we always presented him as Bird. This one is a character out of a fairy tale, and it will be placed in this beautiful wood, and it will be a character of a fairy tale. And in Austria, actually, to get buildings through a permission is quite challenging, especially this. When the bureaucrats actually ask, what is this? This is not a building. No, this is not a building, it's Bird. And they slowly adapted this whole language, and they referred then to the building as him. And then slowly, they also were talking about Bird. And if they would say now no to this project, they would kill it, and they would be the villain of this fairy tale. And not even politicians and bureaucrats want to do that. So this house, then we developed everything before we found a client. So a full modular system. When the client came, we know already, we can ask, what do you want in there? How many modules do you want? What do you want to spend on it? And we could tell him exactly when it would be produced, when it would be delivered, when they can move in, and how much they can pay for it. And there were some really challenging parts that you need to develop before actually finding a client. For example, the seam that goes from 90 degrees to a 45 degree. And bent CLT as the main CLT as the main structural element, and then when you see how it's produced, and it's a kind of probably 5 years ago the building would not have been possible. So it's really somewhat a building of maybe our time. And I'm not sure if it would have been able to produce it anywhere else than in Austria with these special craftsmen we actually have in wood building. So maybe then it's as well a building of our place. And when you then see how, parts, then exactly this part that I showed before, how this one comes together and this seam that it creates, and how exact and actually wood building as well can be. I think that opens not just this kit in you, but as well your heart as an architect a bit. And we have spent a lot of time, in China, and we saw that a lot of people, they did not get close to nature anymore. Because of air pollution and so forth. So this one was really the idea of how to bring people really close to nature. Because when you're close to nature, you see what you really want to protect with your life and with your work that you're doing, and how valuable nature actually for all of us is, and that we are connected to it. And with that, maybe, like every fairy tale, this one as well has a bit of an ecological an educational message. Maybe a little bit back to my father. My dad, he also used to climb the mountains of Himalaya, and he was as well there in the 8,000 meter high mountain region, and Everest and Nanga Parbat and so. And he always said that for him, it's much more adventurous if he climbs our small mountains, but without any security and free solo, just him and the mountain, than going to an 8,000 with Sherpas and with oxygen mask. It's much more adventurous for him. And maybe this is the same case in architecture, that it's not always the big projects, the airports, the stadiums, and so forth, where real innovation happens. Maybe it's more the smaller scale projects where you as an architect and as a planner know every screw that goes into the building before it actually goes in. So this one as well grew in our love for these kind of small projects, and as well this love for kind of a small team. Before, before this time, I always thought I need to elevate how many people we are in the office. When we were 5, then we were 15 or so. When we were nobody, I talked to potential clients. Yeah, let me check with my team and with my partners, and then we get back to you. But there was no team. There was one partner, and this was my wife, Faye. So you always feel, what you are, it's not good enough. And you always want to accelerate what you want to towards what you want to be. But now I'm super happy, that we are a small team. We are 8 people in total, with Faye and myself, and it feels incredible personal then. And we can take projects that are personal. And this one is a really beautiful thing, that we don't need to say, yes to every project, but we can maybe choose the projects that feel personal. And maybe with this personal approach, we also can express our struggle that we're having in this in the process. So, for example, for this project, the client is a incredible, inspiring woman and her 2 daughters. And I had this when we were on site, we had this idea that, okay, we're going to make this long bar. But I was not happy with that, how it looked and so on. And I told them, okay, this is the vision. We want to have like where there is a bit more forest, and that the view completely changes towards the other side. And they said, yeah, they like this general approach, but maybe this is too masculine. So maybe, somewhere a curve or so would do very good. And like it clicked immediately, yes, and this was as well for me a kind of a moment where I thought, okay, I shared now my struggles with the client, and they made the project better, because right afterwards, we add the curve, and it gave the project so many more benefits than it had before. And so it somehow taught me as well, that we can open up in this entire process and let people really coming in and maybe accept or elevate even our level of vulnerability and struggle, because maybe that adds then another layer towards the work. And before, we had all of these self-initiated projects, and now we are getting more and more real projects. So, with real projects, of course, there are also coming real sites and real clients and real budgets. And with that comes as well real compromises and struggles and constraints. But that there is always then this back and forth with the client. Sorry. But the struggles maybe are not so bad, because now with these technologies we are having, like with AI and with social media, architecture can seem incredibly easy. Now everyone could be an architect, and you can design 100 different iterations for the Notre Dame, how it could look like after it burned down. So it seems that it's somewhat architecture could seem easy, and we fall maybe into this trap. But at the end, we are not just as an architect, we are not just creative minds. We are also psychologists. We are also financial advisors, maybe political counsels. We are, I don't know, mentors to clients and their guidance throughout the process. So we need to wear a lot of different hats. And we need to communicate that as well to the client, that this one has value. And that architecture is not this easy part. And we also, you know, and with that is also that architecture is probably not the most healthy part either. You know, we are working somewhere in a dark room on our computer, probably far too much. We are somehow trapped in our own worlds, dreaming up in our own minds. And you know, maybe there is a reason why architects are all wearing black, and it's probably not out of a minimalistic fashion statement. I think it's more an emotional statement. So we are all sad inside, and wearing black is somehow, you know, this cry for help as an architect. But then, you know, there are these incredible rare moments of bliss and of beauty as an architect, where your heart really opens up. And maybe these are so beautiful because they are rare and because they are coming by in a very hard way, and they are earned very hard. And if, you know, a moment like that comes when you come to site and everything somehow seems to fit together, you know, it also changes your mind as an architect. It puts you out from your perspective, and maybe then your struggles, and so they don't seem so big anymore and comparable trivial. And this gives you then as well a bit of a perspective of or a sense of time and place. I had this epiphany when we were building our own studio. I don't know where this confidence came that we needed to build our studio. Probably it came out of a necessity that we had then 2 kids, and our office was exactly at our house, and it was just loud, and we needed to move out. So we found this old carpentry in a very historical town or village. I think they are living 150 people, so it's not necessarily a town. And this historic village comes as well with a very historic building code. And, you know, as an architect, then you're thinking, oh, you know, now every roof needs to have the same angle. Where is my freedom as an architect in that? We had a building line. That means that the building needs to stay exactly at this place. How can I be free when I have something like that? But at the other hand, you're also realizing that this building code is probably, you know, this connector between everything that happened in the past and all the stories that happened in the past. And now it's your time. Now it's your time to add your stories and add your building. And you also know that this one, you know, like all of us, we age. The building ages, the building gets gray. If we are lucky, we also get gray. If we are not, then we need to wear a hat. But and then the time also ends for the building. And then, you know, it's time to actually replace it, and another person can write their own story. So actually dealing then with these lines, it adds as well a certain depth to a project. And then the struggles you had before with it is actually then a beautiful thing. Yeah, so now we are having this office, and don't get me wrong, you know, I love this building, but it as well, and it's fantastic to work in there, but as well it adds now a little bit pressure on our side. So we have this now, but now we also need to fill it with life, and we need to fill it with our stories, and we need to fill it with our ideas. And, you know, maybe we need to grow our team a little bit, but to grow, to grow a team without then losing this naivety and the playfulness, I don't really know how to do that. And if we need to grow our team, we probably also need to get more projects and work on more projects. And it's this kind of, wheel again, this hamster wheel I don't want to fall into. And getting more projects also means probably you cannot be so personal at all the projects. And I also don't know how to do that. And then, growing means also you have to grow your level of professionalism and structure. And maybe you need to put in some rules and guidelines for the office without losing, the passion and the enthusiasm. So this is another thing, I don't really know how to tackle. So I think there are all of these stuff that are incredible difficult for ourselves to do. But as we are now 6 years old, and we somehow everything seems a little bit easier, or seemed a little bit easier early on in our life. I can see this as well for my son Theo. He is now 3, and with how much energy he's doing things that he's not necessarily good in. Telling a story, like his stories are messy. There is no coherent storyline. He's switching between characters. I'm just sitting there and I don't know what he wants to tell me. And there is never a conclusion, not at all. It just stops and said, okay, I'm done with telling. But he does it. And it's cute. And this needs a level of careless, and this one comes with innocence and playfulness. I think we are out of these kind of toddler years now, and we are now 6 years old. So we come to school, we have homework to do, and everything becomes a little bit more serious in a way. And I don't want to necessarily lose all this innocent and playful stuff that we are having in the office. So I don't necessarily know how to guide that. But just preparing, for this lecture, I actually learned a lot about ourselves and about these ideals that I would like to bring back a little bit into the office. And my mom, she shared with me not long ago some letters from my father when he was in Bhutan, 1983. It was exactly the time my mom was pregnant with me, which is a whole other story, why he goes to Bhutan then. But he was there, and then in this expedition group, and they were stuck in the base camp for 3 weeks because there was no weather window where they can push for the summit. And they were stuck there. And he had a lot of time to reflect and to think about his life, why he's so crazy and addicted to climbing that he risks his life now, and he's afraid, he won't come back and never meets me. So his letters, they were filled with this sense of self-doubt and the mortality that he could face. But as well, he said then as a conclusion in a way that he needs to embrace, his weaknesses and his mortality in order to survive. Because with that, he has enough respect for the mountain that he can survive. And maybe there is as well something in architecture that is similar than this, because I think that maybe as well we need to embrace our weaknesses and our self-doubt and this feeling that we are not good enough, because maybe there is no good without the ugly, and maybe the good just has value because the ugly exists. So there is no gratification without the struggle, no summit without the hike. And maybe if we have these opportunities and to talk in public, and to share our work and talk with our peers. Maybe it's not always, you know, the beautiful part and not always the success stories, but maybe as well, you know, sometimes the struggle and the questions that we're having along the way. And maybe this adds then depth to our work and adds, because it humanizes the work and makes it authentic. And maybe that's as well, you know, adds this meaning that we are all so craving for. Maybe, or maybe not. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for I would say the lecture, but also opening up so many black boxes and bucket stages that we all, you know, walk into. So that was beautiful. For many years, I've been trying to avoid the front stage of architecture and try to speak about the material sourcing and the industries and everything that goes behind the kind of beautiful finished kind of image of the building. But today you open a whole other kind of backstage of, you know, the struggles, the doubts, the, you know, personal positioning on any of the things that we do that obviously, you know, are filled with doubts, with decisions. And so I think that was really, at least to me, inspiring. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, and I don't want to take more than mic because I think both me and Areti spoke enough today. Questions from the audience. So you take care.
I didn't think I was going to be the first one to ask a question. So thank you so much for a really vulnerable and honest talk. I think this is really different to what we're used to see in the architecture industry. So thank you for being that person. You mentioned something about how as architects we become the finance advisors and the psychologists, and we have all these roles and hats. And my question here goes on, what's your thoughts around architecture opening up to collaborating with other industries? Because I feel like architects have been very, I am the creative genius, and then everyone else kind of goes on about their day. But now that you mentioned how it's tough and how we actually can't do all of these things, do you see any space in your studio, for example, where you are really small and you want to be very personal, of collaborating with any other sort of artists or any other engineers, any other psychologists, sociologists? Like, when are we going to embrace the fact that architecture and the city building affects everyone else, and we can't just, as architects, decide what happens to everyone around it?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for the kind words. Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, we need experts in a lot of different ways. And I think that is not so much the struggle in working together. I think for architects, it's more tough to work together with other architects. And I think this you need to do when you're small. Because you don't have, you know, the power within the office to do all the tasks, especially when it becomes a bit of a larger project. But I also think that maybe our generation is a little bit different. You know, the star, or this kind of star architect thing is a little bit over. This one architect that stands on site most of the time with a red scarf, and just, yeah, okay, this is the idea and this we're gonna do, right? I think this image of the architect, this changed. And I think for our generation, a kind of a collaborative between offices is quite common. Like we have, I would say, I don't know, half of all of our projects happen with other offices. Most of the time, you know, we get a contract and we ask somebody else then, hey, would you like to collaborate with us? For example, we did a project with Arthur Mamumani together, because they are really into fabrication. We are not. right? So you always look for partners that elevate your own skills that you probably lack within your office. So I think that yeah, and especially when you're small, I think a sense of collaboration is a must, because I think there are either just two ways to actually do a big project. So one is you hire when a big project is coming, but that means you have fluctuation throughout the years. And I think all of us worked in offices where we hated that, like when a lot of people were coming and then the project died or ended, and then more people were even fired than hired before. So there is always this coming and going, but how can you build then really an office culture where people feel welcome and feel part of it? And so this one, I think a more safer strategy is to grow maybe very slow and strategic, but whenever a bigger project come, share it with other architects in a collaborative way. And a lot of architects are having great ideas, and maybe then the project gets richer and more diverse.
Oh, thank you for your talk. I had a question about, you talked about the importance of your projects being personal, but at the same time, you also reject the idea of the star architect. So I'm wondering how you feel about authorship. Is it important that we feel that your buildings are yours, or is that more something which is important to you in the process of developing it?
Yeah, I think with personal, I more mean that things that are going in our own life, we can be expert in. And to bringing this one into onto the table. So I would, like creating an airport, for example, I wouldn't know where to start with it because I have zero experience in it, and it wouldn't feel any personal to me to work on a project like that. Authorship, yes. I mean, at the other hand, you also want to be excited about the things you're doing, right? And there is so much excitement when you're working on a project. So, for example, this is what I really miss when I use tools like Midjourney. So I feel that I'm not the author of that. And maybe this one as well comes, with the AI, and the outcome is always incredible, right? What it can do, and we probably might all be on a level more or less scared about it. But I miss the ownership of it, what I'm doing. And a friend of mine, he asked me why I'm not using Midjourney anymore and publishing anything about the AI. And I told him that I'm missing the struggle. Like I don't struggle with it. Like I don't suffer through the process of finding an idea. It all feels really easy. So I think in the authorship, it's important, that as well this personality in a way is as well in there. But this one then comes as well with all of this negative stuff that I tackled.
As I could see, like you are making a lot of projects with wood, and I wanted to ask you, while making a project, how do you think about the aging the wood? It's gonna change its color, and what do you think about aging and changing the color of the project and the building after all?
Yeah, like ourselves, right? I mean, we all change in a way and get older. I mean, I find like I have a lot of conversations about that with clients. Some of them, they don't necessarily like that buildings are getting gray at first, but I think it's the most beautiful thing, that it shows you, you know, that the things that you're doing, it's not forever. It's just here for a certain amount of time. And like yourself, right? And it makes the building as mortal as somehow you are. So I think that how projects age, and this one already, you know, aged. It became on a lot of parts already really gray where the runoff of the water is, and it gives a character like this treehouse even more character. You know, it's the scars and so. So it's a little bit like an old farmhouse or an old house where you see, you know, these lines that were marked how the kids grow. You know, it's telling stories, and I think something that is perfect and that is always the same. It also is a little bit dull. I think the real beauty is somewhere in the imperfection of things, and that you also see that buildings just age with yourself.
Hi, thank you for a great lecture. I have a couple of questions that sort of interconnect. How do you find, or I guess approach clients that follow the similar morals as you? Do they usually come with the similar design intent to you, or do you throughout the process sort of guide them towards a more sustainable mindset or a more holistic mindset? And my second question is, leading up to that, did you ever during your career struggle finding clients that match the same mindset as your practice?
Yes, to the second question, we didn't just struggle to find clients who have the same mindset than us, but we struggled to find clients, period. But that's, you know, when you are either doing competitions or you're doing self-initiated projects. And for me, competitions is something I don't like. We have not done a competition in years. I just want to, even though, you know, you get invited now to some competitions, but it's still something that I don't want to tackle. I rather self-initiate projects with topics that I'm really interested in. And I don't know, maybe we are in a bit of a unique role, and not by choice, but maybe just by chance. But with building this office in the mountain, clients already come to you, right? It's not that if we would, like, for example, in Beijing, you know, the door opened and there's an architectural studio. Okay, I'm now the client, and you know, you have some walk-ins. But now people they chose to come to the mountain to have a chat with you about a project. So that changes already a little bit the hierarchy between us and the client. But I didn't plan that. This just happened somehow by chance. And because we are a very, very small team, we have the freedom to say no to projects or to clients that we don't necessarily want to work with or at. But as I said, you know, this is as well, you know, this sounds now that we have this strict line of what we are doing, but I'm constantly shifting and finding then excuses in my own head that might make the client or the project appealing. And it's always a bit of a struggle. But for example, we have in the office this one time in 2 weeks think tank where the entire office is coming together, and it is moderated by Flo, one of my partners. And there we talk about this stuff, right? So where should our line be? Where we don't take projects, or with these clients we don't want to work on, or what are the perfect projects that we would like to get. So now we are because we are small, and because we're in the mountain, I think there are a couple of factors that puts us a bit in a unique position there. But I think you could say that if we would have a party with all of our clients, it would be a really fun evening. So I think they share a certain mindset and appreciate a certain amount of personal approach to the project.
So we have time only for one question from the audience, but then we are going to drink together some beers, and so you can approach Chris directly.
Thank you for your talk and sharing the honesty and the vulnerability of the process. It's super important, especially now in a time when, as you were saying, AI in mid-journey like shows these incredible products, but there's no humanness and we can't really empathize with the process. So yeah, thank you for sharing that part of the process. My question was about how you talked about like the importance of a connection with nature, and basically how have you managed to, or in your studio, promote a culture of balance, like work-life balance, while also maintaining the standards of your work, and yeah, basically how you found that balance.
Yeah, this is probably much more difficult, than than sad. I think we are trying a lot, that we have a balance in there, and I think we also moved back to the mountains to create this balance in our life. I don't really know if it works out so well. I don't feel very balanced. We tried, to, of course, in the office, there are working hours, and people, they don't work on weekends and on evenings, and so to create. It's very important, I think, that people have a life outside of the office, because if there's just office, you wouldn't feel you wouldn't feel a certain amount of life living in the mountains or living in proximity to the mountains, right? But I have to say that I work a lot. And this one with 2 kids, it's a struggle, because you're always feeling that like you are in between things. You always have a bad feeling that you're not now with a family, or that you're not now working on a project, and you're always feeling you're behind everything, right? So I think before the kids, I would say that we had a pretty good amount of work-life balance. With the kids, it's pure survival mode at the moment. But we also know that, they are now 1 and 3 years old, and this thing is getting better at a certain point. But to figure it out, and having and balancing somehow family and an office, and then life to it, it is a challenge. And as well, I think Daniel, he asked me probably the last 2-3 years every time if I can come to a lecture, but it was first of all, I didn't really want to give lecture, but it also wouldn't have been possible with the kids, and you feel like standing here, I feel guilty, that now Faye needs to juggle both of them and put both of them to sleep, and so it's always somehow you're feeling always a certain amount of guilt, but it will be better. And I think then when the kids are then going to school, or at a certain point are out of the house, then I think you really know what the balance in your life then is. So maybe this is as well now the struggle, that you can then appreciate once this struggle is not there anymore. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we'll wrap it up here. We will have around like 25-30 minutes of beers. I'm sure many of you want to engage with Chris, but let him drink a little bit, his peers at the
I need
studio.
to catch up with my team.
Exactly. Just to balance also the balance of alcohol between here and Austria. So it's we can level things up. Chris, I've been like Penelope in the station waiting for you 3 years after asking you out like for, I don't know how many times, but I'm so happy I, insisted and never, stop asking, because this has been fantastic. I was really amazed by your work. I am still am, but knowing this other face of you and what you shared to us, which I think is extremely important, and I think everybody here appreciate very much, has been equally fascinating. So IAAC is your house. Even for a master, if you are interested, happy to arrange.